Hi, Girl Scouts. My name's Molly. I'm the Program Director at Girl Scouts of Virginia Skyline Council. I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, and today we're going to be covering steps 1 and 4 of the Outdoor Art Expert Badge. When you've completed all 5 steps of this badge, you will have learned to create art in the outdoors with a focus on the environment. So first things first, we're going to cover all 5 steps, just go over what they are. And then again, we're going to be doing step 1. We're going to give you some advice on where you can do that on your own. And step 4, we're going to do together here today. So step 1 is to explore art outdoors. Step 2 is to make something. 3 is to create or share music inspired by nature. Step 4 is to capture nature digitally. And step 5 is to design outdoors. So again, step 1, we're going to cover some ideas that you can do that on your own at home. So look for that. And then step 4 is the one we're going to be doing together today, capture nature digitally. All right, so a couple things to keep in mind when you're going outdoors, since this is an active outdoor badge. You just want to keep in mind a few tips. Now, obviously, things are a little different right now. We're not venturing far from our homes. You may be going around your local neighborhood, things like that. But just in the future and for right now, I normally would recommend the buddy system, especially if you're going far from home. Obviously, right now, your buddy is probably going to be somebody in your home with you. But if, keep in mind for the future, too, just either take a buddy or let a parent know where you're going when you're going a little further out than we are these days. You want to be prepared too when you're out in the outdoors. You want to make sure you're wearing the appropriate clothes, the appropriate shoes. You also want to be prepared with other things, your supplies, like you want to take a water bottle with you, maybe some snacks. First aid kit is often a good idea to take with you. And then for this activity in particular, and anytime you're going in the outdoors, a cell phone is a great idea. You also, for this particular activity, could use a camera. So if you've got one of those, bring it along as well. And then finally, you always want to be aware of your surroundings and other people that might be out there, and the L&T principles, the leave no trace. Especially for this activity, it's really perfect for leave no trace and the principle of leaving what you find. With our cameras, we're going to be capturing nature digitally, so we don't need to capture it physically, right? So we're going to go over a few things with regard to that, and you'll see later, leaving what you find and just being respectful of the outdoor environment. So we're going to get started with a couple things for step 4. We're going to go over your supplies and get started there. All right, let's get started on step 4, capture nature digitally. So first, I'm going to talk broadly about wildlife and nature and outdoor photography and talk about some techniques that photographers use to capture those really gorgeous images that I'm sure you've seen on magazines and online of beautiful landscapes or really captivating photos of nature. Because there's a lot of different techniques that those photographers use, and the first and foremost is spending a lot of time outdoors and really connecting to the outdoor environment. You're not going to capture the best, most amazing images of nature if you're never out there. So I'm going to start by showing an example. So here is one from a calendar of a gorgeous landscape it was taken on the Appalachian Trail. And so a few things to keep in mind. The photographer probably had a nice long hike to get up to the top of this mountain to get this gorgeous photo. Step 1, obviously you're spending a lot of time outside. And then it's sunset, right? It's really, really pretty because of all those beautiful colors, the nice blue mountains, the gorgeous pinks in the sky. And, you can't get a picture like this just any old time. You could probably get a great picture of the mountains whenever, but for a gorgeous picture like this, you need to be patient and you need to plan your trip on that hike so that you're up there when the sun's setting, or maybe at the sunrise, because those only happen twice a day, and that's such a beautiful aspect of the photograph is that gorgeous, gorgeous color in the sky, right? And so, yeah, when you think about it, the photographer not only had to plan out where to go and what kind of equipment to bring, but they had to, plan to spend a lot of time in nature at certain times of day. And so those are, things that you have to keep in mind when you're capturing nature digitally, is what kind of photo you want and what you have to do to make that happen. I'm going to show you one more from the same calendar. So it's also a nice, gorgeous mountain hike. And it's a lot different. It's a different time of day. You can tell the sun's high in the sky. And so you've got this gorgeous, gorgeous blue sky. You've got really rich colors. I don't know if you can tell. It's dark, but there's really, really rich colors in the reds and the greens down here. And one way that you can capture this, if you've ever taken a picture just in the middle of the day when the sun's really, really bright, you may have noticed the tendency for the camera is to just make the photo really, really bright. So you wouldn't have darkness here. Your blue sky is not going to be popping quite as much. But photographers, especially outdoor nature photographers, often use things called filters. In particular, in this case, I would assume a polarizing filter to create those rich, rich colors and that really captivating image right there. So we're going to talk a little bit more about filters in just a minute. We're even going to make a few of our own. But I want to show you a couple more things. So one other aspect of photography, especially when you're talking about nature photography or wildlife photography, is going to be your perspective. So when you go out and when we look later today, if you're just looking at the big things and the big scene and like big broad landscapes like that, you're only going to get one part of your environment, right? You're going to get the big, broad, beautiful scene. But in that scene, there's a million other teeny tiny details. There could be maybe a little flower that you have to get up close and personal with to really capture. There might be a deer over in the woods, right? There could be a gorgeous tree that the bark is really, really pretty. So you want to make sure your perspective and you're getting all of the image, all the images you want. And so taking a look at perspective is something we're going to do today too. So we're going to start. I'm going to give you an example right here. This is a photo of a bunch of teeny tiny, what are those? Mushrooms. Just a lot of itty bitty mushrooms. And they're really, really cool photos of them. That's some fungus maybe. So you're going to find a lot of things like this outdoors. And if you're just taking pictures of the broad scene, these guys are little. You're not going to capture them. And if you're just, just walking around taking pictures, you might miss some of these really cool things. There's also itty bitty, let's see, salamander, super cute. And so keeping in mind that there's a lot of things out there. And to get those images, you're going to want to change your perspective. So not only looking for them, while walking, you're going to have to get on your hands and knees sometimes and get really, really up close and personal with those itty bitty objects to capture those images as well. So that's really important to keep in mind when we're talking about perspective. And then with wildlife photography in particular, you can't always get up close and personal. Like that salamander was probably pretty easy, but say you want to get a picture of a bird, a woodpecker right there. You try to get up close and personal with that guy, he's just going to fly away. So sometimes you do need different equipment. So maybe a long zoom lens to make photos like that happen. And I'm going to end with one photo that I just really love of a moose because they're super cute. So yeah, thinking about all the different ways you can capture the outdoors and the environment around you. And obviously today we're just going out in our backyards. But I don't know, I have deer walk through my yard all the time. And so I've got lots of different wildlife, lots of different flowers, I've seen mushrooms in my yard. So there's a whole environment out there. You don't have to go out into the woods necessarily. If you got the woods in your backyard though, go for it. So the next thing we're going to talk about, briefly mentioned, is filters. So many of you are probably aware of filters on your camera, apps on your phone. Those are ways that you can edit a photo after it's taken to get different effects, right? So maybe black and white, maybe you want to add some blur, maybe you want to up the contrast or up the saturation, make it really colorful and bright. So those are all really effective tools that you can use on photos after you've taken them. But many photographers choose instead to use what are filters. And they are a piece of equipment that you put onto a camera, and that will give you a different effect in your photograph right when you take it. So you don't have to mess with it later. It's going to affect your image as you're taking it. And so there's a whole ton of different filters you can use. I've got Got a handful here. Let's see. So one that I was talking about earlier was a polarizing filter. So I don't know if you can see that. It's a little darker than that other one that I showed you that was just clear. And one of the really cool aspects of a polarizing filter is when you put it on your camera, it affects the light around you. So it changes the way the rays are interacting with your camera sensor. And it can really, really pull in those beautiful blue skies. Like I said, it makes the colors pop. It's a really common one to use among nature photographers. And in a few minutes here, I'm going to show you some examples and give you some descriptions kind of what that looks like. Another filter I have, let me see if I can find it, is this one. And it's got cross hatching in there. Let me see if you can get up close. So you can kind of see it's got stuff in there. And what that does is it makes points of light. So at nighttime when there's maybe different points of light in the photograph, it turns them all into little stars. So it's really, really pretty. It's cool in that regards. And so, you know, filters are amazing to use if you've got, say, big digital SLR like this. You can pop them onto the front of your camera. You screw them on and they all come in different sizes. But if you don't have a camera like that, that's fine. We're going to show you how you can maybe make a filter today just with materials you have at your house, and you can hold it over your iPhone as just a, you know, just for fun. So one of the different things I like to do is, give me one second. So I made an example here. So this is just a roll of tape that I put saran wrap over top of, and then I rubber banded it so it stays nice and tight. And that can be a really cool way to use a filter on top of maybe your phone's camera. And one of the fun effects that I like to use, I have this one really big filter and it's just plain glass. It doesn't have, you know, it doesn't add any effects beyond what I choose to do for it. And one of the neat effects I like to do, it's to kind of give you a weird perspective. I like to put, you can use Vaseline or I have Vicks Vapor Rub. And you can rub a little bit of that just on the surface of your filter. And then when you take your photo, it's going to add some really cool blur effects, and you can control where the focus is even more than you ordinarily would. And so I can use my camera for that, or I can use my phone's camera. Either way, both of them are going to work, and I'll show you the examples that I took using this earlier today. I can show you some of what this looks like. And then again, I'm going to show you how to make this on your own at home. So you might not have that nifty glass filter that I've got, but things you probably do have at home are saran wrap, right? An old roll of tape. If it's an empty roll of tape, that's better because otherwise you're gonna have to take it apart later. I've also got this. It's like a mason jar lid that doesn't have the inside, so it's just a ring, and then a rubber band. So what you're gonna do is I'm gonna use this mason jar lid. Take some saran wrap. I'm going to hold it over the lid. And then I'm going to pull it real tight on the back side so that I know that I'm getting a nice clean line on the front here. Whoop. And if you mess up the first time, that's okay. Just try to get a nice clean top. So it's hard to see, but you can kind of tell it's nice and smooth. And then I'm going to wrap the rubber band just right on the edge there and get it into place. And then boom. Then I just have to pull these extras out of the way. You can cut them off if you prefer. Doesn't really matter, especially if we're just using our phone. You're just going to be popping that lens right in there, and it doesn't have to be super perfect. So we are going to mess around and take some photos with these. And I'm going to show you one other thing that I love to do to make just a cool filter. If you've got a dry erase marker, and I'm going to grab another of my clear filters that I've got here, you can again use that. You can use your homemade filter. Taking a dry erase marker, this one's green, just going to color the lens. And then I'll show you when you take a picture, you can see how green that is. Oh, get you. When you take a picture with it in front of your phone's camera, it's going to have a nice green tint. So you can use whatever color you want. And you don't have to use a dry erase marker, but just make sure you use one that's not going to be like a thick line. You want to make sure there's light passing through there to be able to get a photo. And again, I'm going to color my homemade one too, so we can get, oh, squeaky, so we can get some photos with that and see what it looks like. Again, you can use whatever color you like. If you use a blue, it's going to turn your colors really cool, or it's going to make your photos really cool in color. If you wanted to use maybe a yellow highlighter, that's going to make everything nice and warm, and it's going to feel even different. So these are all really cool things you can do, and I'm going to mess around with that one with the blur again, and show you some photos that you can get with those effects. So stay tuned. All right, welcome. We are outdoors, out in nature, specifically in my backyard, and we're going to complete this fourth step of capturing nature digitally. I found a nice fern in my backyard, so I walked around, got to know the things. It's my backyard, so I already kind of know where everything is. But I saw this fern, and I thought it'd be a really good example. Find ferns a lot in the outdoors, and they're really, really pretty, and it's cool to get a different perspective on them. So we're going to use some of our filters that we talked about and take some photos. The first one is I just used Vicks Vapo Rub, but you can use Neosporin or Vaseline or whatever you've got that's similar to that. And you just kind of smudge it around on the plastic. If you've got a glass filter you can use, that's great too. But just for our purposes, we're going to use this. And then to use the filter, you just hold it right in front of your camera's lens. So if it's your phone camera, put it right up and close, okay? And then shoot through it to take the photo. And this is a really cool filter to get like a blur effect on the outsides. And you can really control what the image is focused on. There's ways to do that editing after the fact with different filters too. But like we said, it's sometimes really nice to get the effect you want in the original photograph, so you don't have to go edit it later. So I'm going to share some of these photos with you so you can see what the effect is. The next filter we're going to use is I have the yellow marker, and I'm going to try to get a nice warm tone to this photo. So with a green plant, sometimes it's nice to throw in another color and see if it warms it up. So I'm going to take one on my camera for this. See what we think. Get one on my phone as well. Oh yeah, you can already see the effect. And then last, I'm going to show you, this isn't a traditional filter, but it's a really cool technique you can use to get a different perspective like we've been talking about. And it's just a cut off of the end of a, toilet paper roll. And if I hold that in front of my camera's lens, it's going to give me like a vignette, if you know what that is. It's the black edges around a photo. It's kind of an old-fashioned look to it. So it's a really cool way also to change the focus of the photo you're taking. So that's a really cool one. I like that as just kind of a fun thing to add. And yeah, let's get these photos loaded up. Okay, so for our first photo, we've got the one of the fern, and it's with no filter at all, so you can see an example of what this photo would look like without any alterations. You can tell the whole fern is in focus, and the color looks pretty natural, very much what it looks like in real life. So that's the first photo. Let's get to our second photo. Now this one is the one we used that blurring type filter. It's the one with the Vaseline or the Neosporin that we rubbed on the front of it, and you can tell that the focus is a lot different in this one from the last one. You're focused mostly on that tiny little fern in the middle, and depending on where you move your filter around in front of your lens, it's going to change which part of the photo is in focus. And so you have a lot of control there that you don't necessarily have without that filter in the steps while you're taking the photo. Sometimes you can change that after the fact, but it's really, really cool to get it while you're taking the photo in the first place. All right, so our next photo is going to be this one with the yellowing filter. And as you can tell, the color is a lot different than it was in that original photo. So instead of the more kind of blues and greens that you see in the fern in that first photo, it's a very warm yellow tone to the photo. So again, you can change the color to whatever you want. You can make it bluer, you can make it purpley. It's basically a color filter that changes the entire color of your photo. And again, you can use multiple filters. So you could combine this yellow filter, put it on top of a blur filter, and then you've got 2 in 1. So you can really play around with this. And then we're going to get to our last photo, which is the vignette. So remember, this is the one with the roll, the empty toilet paper roll in front of the camera. And as you can tell, it just makes a nice black ring basically on the edges. And it's just a really fun way to get a different effect and a kind of a slightly different look to your photo. And I think it's a really neat one to use if you want. It's kind of old-timey too. So if you take this and then also maybe the yellowing together, it could look very much like a sepia tone type old-fashioned photo. So those are just some of the effects you can use. And I hope you had fun today. Go ahead and play around with some filters and capture nature digitally. Thanks for joining.